Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Leistikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
What is up, Hawkeye fans and Cyclone fans and Big Ten fans, Iowans everywhere? So glad to have you with us for episode 4 of Legends and Listeners here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. I am your host, Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, and I have been covering the Hawkeyes for quite a long time. I remember being in the press box in 1998 when the Cyclones broke the big long streak against Hayden Fry's final team. We are coming to you live from the Channel Seed Studios, and to dive into CyHawk Week, it is here. Such a meaningful and passionate week for our state. Scott Dochterman, I'm happy to be teaming up with you from The Athletic. Scott, are you ready for former President motorcades and this biannual CyHawk circus of names?
Am I ready for it? I don't know if I'm ever ready for it. When you get the politics and the CyHawk together, it can be an explosive combination. But I am interested. Were you with Voice of the Hawkeyes or the Cedar Rapids Gazette at
Oh, man. Let's see. I started at the Gazette in 98, so I think I was. I started. Yeah, I would have been with the Gazette. That would have been one of my first games with the Gazette in 98. So that's crazy to think about. With Jim Ecker and Mike Halas. I probably wrote the sidebar. I have no idea what I wrote, but I bet it had to do with Darren Davis or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say I was the same way. I was with the Muscatine Journal starting year 2, and I remember going to the pink locker room area and Darren Davis having an outstanding game that day, and really kind of like 1995 with Northwestern. I think 1998 with Iowa State really ushered in a new era, and it ushered in a new era of this rivalry. You know, now this is the 25th edition since counting that game as kind of the new era, and I think Iowa's up 13-11 under that reign. So here we are. There's always some drama associated with this series. Every year there's something new. And I think here we are this week, a lot of different topics to discuss.
Legends and Listeners is brought to you every Thursday by Heartland Flags and Gifts. If you go to the website, heartlandflags.com, you can find over 50 styles of Hawkeye flags alone. I saw one today that said, "Go Hawks, beat State," with the Tiger Hawk logo, very apropos for this week. New customers get 5% off their first order. Heartland Flags and Gifts provides free shipping anywhere in the U.S., constantly is firing up new products and offers nearly every team, every sport, and every flag. Visit our friends online, heartlandflags.com, or in store at 3719 Southwest 9th Street in Des Moines. Scott, you mentioned kind of the drama, the passion, the contentious nature of this rivalry. We were going to dig into the X's and O's of this CyHawk game for sure a little bit later in our entree portion of the broadcast, but let's talk about the rivalry itself. So much drama over the years. What kind of sticks out to you? You're great at this history stuff. I know you've written about it a lot. So the floor is yours. What are some of the highlights that we can kind of pluck to kind of emphasize the rivalry nature of this game?
You know, a lot of this comes off the field, which is crazy. I mean, I think you look back 4 years ago with the band situation that forced this to linger way beyond where we wanted it to. Yeah.
What a night. Yeah.
Yes. 10 years ago, we had somebody break into the Iowa locker room and steal wallets and iPhones, and Iowa State paid for, LeVar Woods was one of them. And, there were several taken. And it turned out to be an Iowa fan who left the country. And so just some craziness there. I think we look back at going all the way back to the beginning of the Jamie Pollard, Gary Barta era. And the reason why there was this clause in this series of 20% of the home gate went to the visitor. It started all the way back in the very beginning of the reignition of this rivalry in the 70s, because Iowa State had too small of a stadium to actually have this game at that time. So Iowa gave Iowa State 20%, and it's just something that kind of grandfathered in, even with all of the once the game started going back and forth, and it always benefited Iowa State because it had a smaller stadium, and then also charged less money for their tickets. Well,
Right.
when the first one in 2007, Iowa State, I remember, charged $93 a ticket for Iowa fans. And that became an issue right away with Iowa, because there was the billboard in Cedar Rapids on 380. It's a Cyclone state after the 2005 game. And then $93 a ticket. And then Iowa State and Iowa would give Iowa State, 20% of its gate from that game. Iowa State would give it 20% with Jamie Pollard, 20% of an average home gate. And so Iowa and Nebraska and those games would always get 55,000 roughly at Jack Trice. Then there was the Colorados and the Missouris and the Ball States of the world that were like in the 30s at that point, not anymore, of course. And so Iowa shut down there was a correspondence between Bruce Vandervelde and Bob Bowlesby about extending the series to 2020. Turns out Iowa said, no, that was just correspondence. That wasn't a real contract. And so that got into a big fat spite between the two. And then, of course, they ended up settling kind of in the middle after the 2012 game. No more 20%. They extended the series, and here we are through 2027, CyHawk. But all those moments, and then there were a ton more on the field, Chad, we could always discuss if we want to. But what kind of sticks out for you with this series, both on the field and off the field? Hey, you're muted there, guy.
Yeah, still rusty on this stuff. Yeah, a lot sticks out to me. You did a great job recapping that, Scott. By the way, speaking of sellout crowds, Iowa just announced it's sold out for the home schedule for the 2023 season. So I guess all the angst about run blocking last week did not deter ticket sales. That's the second straight season that has happened. So, but anyway, getting to the Iowa State rivalry, certainly for me, it's I live in a town where it's basically 50-50. So we're talking off-field stuff, neighborhoods. People always want to talk about it, and which is cool. I mean, it's like, what do you think about the game? And it's just the fact that it's just been so back and forth, the last 25 years, as you said, 13 and 11. Now Iowa, has won, I guess, 13. Oh gosh. Ferentz is like 13-6, right? Since the 0-4 start, I believe, against Iowa State, something like that. So
yes, that's right.
So Iowa's gotten a little bit of the upper hand here, but to me, I just like, I feel like these games have just been so good, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. I mean, the 2019 game, 18-17, the top 10 matchup 2 years ago, on all these are names, comes down to, Iowa just making Brock Purdy have a bad day and scoring a scoop and score on Jack Campbell. And, gosh, you think about the names in that game, Breece Hall fumbling, Jack Campbell scooping and scoring. These are high-level NFL players, presumably. Brock Purdy, like I said, go back to, I think back to 2015, honestly, like that was such a pivotal moment in this, resurgence, I guess, of the Ferentz era. It was 17-17 in the fourth quarter, and Desmond King, they threw him back at punt returns that year, uncorks a big kind of crucial punt return, sets Iowa up to kind of tilt the field that one direction. And I remember being down on the field with Rick Brown with 2 minutes to go, and CJ Beathard rolling left and finding little Riley McCarron, from Dubuque, Iowa, in the corner of that end zone over there. And, the Hawks win that game. That didn't end up being a very good Iowa State team, but it was a tense game. Iowa goes on to be 12-0 and, kind of wrote some history there. So I feel like this game, Scott, and I wrote this week, just is a springboard when Iowa has good seasons. I mean, think about 15. Think about 19, think about 21, which ended up being a pretty special season most of the way. And even 17 to an extent. I mean, Iowa finally got over the hump with a bowl win that year. So that's where I look to in terms of this rivalry. So anyway, big game for both teams.
No question. And the last 5 that Iowa State has won in this series have come down to a field goal or less. And last year being among them, Iowa misses a field goal in the rain at the end to send it to overtime. You think back to 2014, where Iowa State had not a very good team, and Iowa had one of the more disappointing teams. Came down to the end. The 9-6 game in 2012, and then in 2011, the last time Iowa State won in Ames against Iowa, triple overtime, 44-41. So it was the juxtaposition of 44-41 one year in overtime, then 9-6 the next year in Iowa City. And then, I remember the Shaggy game, in 2007, where kicks a field goal at the very end, and I think it was 15-13. So
yep, it was.
All of these games, they're very, very close when Iowa State wins, going back all the way to, 05, which was a kind of a dominant effort in Ames, to Iowa, winning some close ones, also winning some big ones, decisive ones. But I'd say recently they've all been very close, hot, contested games, and I think that's what we're going to see on Saturday. Where I think the teams have real similar blueprints. It's just, to me, how do you mask your deficiencies and how you enhance your strengths is really going to determine the outcome of this game.
Good stuff there. Next entree or appetizer topic, I should say, is how does Iowa handle this quarterback situation with Cade McNamara? I mean, it definitely has elevated in its concern. I remember talking with you at Kinnick before the game, just talking about, if Cade has some kind of re-injury, this could be a really long season. And I think we saw that. I mean, it is a considerable drop off from QB1 to QB2 at this point in time. Cade will start on Saturday in Ames, but it's very murky how much he is able to do, Scott. Last night on his radio show, Kirk did say he'll be out there. He's also said it's going to be week to week. He did offer a little encouragement. He said this week's gone well so far. But he did acknowledge it was a setback last Saturday against Utah State in the game. So how does Iowa handle this, Scott? I mean, I feel like here's what I'll pose to you. Whatever happens Saturday, do you shut him down? Do you shut him down for a week or two to get ready for Penn State, just knowing you got to set yourself up for the rest of the season, or is that too short-sighted?
It really depends on the severity of the injury. And when you're talking about a muscle, this is why we don't – you can't make predictions. You can't, say, probable, questionable. It's questionable. And that's what he went out and played, but you could see a severely limited playbook. They were in shotgun most of the time, which you don't have to drive with your legs when you're dropping back. They had almost no, it was like, 1 out of 10 plays were some sort of a play action, because when you're in shotgun, you don't have a lot of play action. No rollouts, no bootlegs, no quarterback sneak when it was 4th and 1, and that's usually what they do. So that really limits your playbook. Now, as Kirk said on Saturday, and I agree with him, is you make up for that with experience. And I think that's going to be impactful. I think you need him out there on Saturday, but you've got to be careful, because it is a long season, and as important as the CyHawk is to the fans and to the players, and I'm not saying he sacrificed this game, but it's not as important as a Big Ten game in the big scheme of things, because when you get a Big Ten championship, if you get a Big Ten championship, that matters more, or a divisional title matters more than an individual game, any individual game during the season, let alone a non-conference one. So I think you got to be very, very careful here. I would still play him if he's capable of playing him, but I would be very careful. Chad, what's kind of your impression?
Well, I'm with you. Cade is a competitor. He's not going to want to sit out this CyHawk game. He came to Iowa to play. He's gonna tough it out as long as they let him. And I think that was what the case was last week too. And frankly, I think they kind of needed him last week to play and win that game. Utah State gave it a good run, and Deacon Hill just not ready for prime time yet, frankly. We'll see if he has to take some snaps out there at Jack Trice on Saturday, but I would be inclined to. I mean, Kirk. I feel like Kirk's setting the stage just a little bit here, Scott. Like, it's week to week. We'll see how it goes. I feel like there's an opening if they can get by this week or whatever happens this week. Maybe it looks bad this week, and they're like, we got to shut him down for 2 weeks and see what he can do against Penn State. I mean, I'm with you. I would take the big picture approach. I think they can beat Western Michigan with Deacon Hill, maybe even Joe Labus. Maybe he's back to speed by then. You're supposed to get Bo Stevens back next week as well on the offensive line, maybe reinforce that. So, yeah, I'm with you. Like, see how it goes this week, see how he responds. But I'd just be inclined to try to rest this thing up as long as possible with Penn State coming up, Michigan State.
Purdue, Wisconsin, Purdue. Minnesota.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah! And
right.
So yeah, I don't know. And then just this, I mean, I have a lot of fans asking me, Scott, last thing we got to move on, but will Iowa run a sneak? Will Iowa run any bootlegs this week? Is Kirk Ferentz playing possum there, or is he really going to be limited as he says?
I think the fact that we're playing guessing games means everybody's playing guessing games. I'm sure John Heacock is saying, does he really mean that? I mean, or is he just playing around? And the question is, we really don't know. Are they trying to play a head game where it's kind of the other way around? Yeah, it's a good question. I think in some respects, he's going to probably, whether it's a sneak is one thing, you kind of have to deal with that when it comes. If it's 4th and inches, are you going to run a real play or are you going to run a sneak? I think they're probably running sneak, but the bootlegs and the rollouts, those are probably things that are going to be on the skid mark, for another week or two. And, how much does that limit Brian's play calling? What can that do for the drive for 325? It might impact it,
Yeah.
But winning is the most important thing. And as we saw, 24 points last week, that's been on people's minds. And even if it's not on the team's mind.
Yeah, and I'm still a proponent for the Deacon Hill QB sneak package, the short yardage package. I know it's probably anti-Ferentz, but hey, they ran something with Sam Laporta last year in the bowl game, with him running quarterback. I mean, get creative, man. Get creative, Brian. I mean, do something
I do
different.
the Wildcat. I do the Wildcat.
Sure.
More than I would a Deacon Hill sneak package. If that means snap the ball directly to Caleb Johnson in the shotgun or have him go under center for a sneak. I mean, you're always scared about getting the snap.
Yeah.
But I would do that more than I would put in a quarterback who is kind of a lumbering giant, if you will, when he's out there.
How about Cooper DeJean at quarterback? Wouldn't that be something?
Man,
Wildcat?
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting these people excited.
There'd be T-shirts. If he could go under center and Cooper DeJean, DeJean it, or something like that. And you're getting too deeply excited.
You sold me, man. Okay, that's the solution. Short yardage, Cooper DeJean in Wildcat.
Yes.
I love it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right, Scott, let's dig into our main topic today. But first, I do want to remind you, folks, that the NFL regular season starts tonight, and Circa Sports is the exclusive sports betting app of Iowa everywhere. Circa Sports is betting the way it should be, with the highest limits, lowest holds, and the best odds. Download the app today at App Store or circasports.com. Chiefs versus Lions tonight, plus 4.5 is the line. And Scott, the Circa prop for Sam Laporta is over under 30.5 receiving yards tonight. I think I would lean under just because rookie tight ends struggle in the NFL, but I bet they want to use him too, and he's going to be on the field a lot. So,
yeah, he's going to start, and so you look at him, and I remember T.J. Hawkinson, set like a rookie record for receiving tight ends on his first game with the Lions, like 124 yards, 4 or 5 years ago or whatever it was. So, can Sam Laporta do that against a team that doesn't have Chris Jones? I don't know. I'd probably take the under too.
All right, Scott, central topic today is who has the edge on Saturday. We wanted to make this about the matchup itself. The spread at Circa is Iowa -4. Over-under is 36.5. I kind of want to start on the defensive side of the ball because that's where the strength of both teams lie. And I want to ask this question to you out of the gate, Scott. Who has the better secondary?
Wow, that's a great question right away. I mean, that's really hitting me in the face. I I guess I would lean towards Iowa slightly, but I mean, it's like 51-49. I mean, TJ Tampa's a terrific, corner. I mean, I thought Jeremiah Cooper had a great game against UNI, obviously two interceptions, a pick six, and was really physical. But I also look at Iowa with Cooper DeJean. He's probably a little bit higher pro prospect. Um, I think Xavier Wampa has got that potential. I like the way, kind of like I like Miles Purchase to an extent, Bo Freiler, but I also like Quinn Schulte and Sebastian Castro as much or more. Deshaun Lee played really well the other day. Can he do it again, against a little bit better unit? I lean Iowa, but it's like 50-49, 51-49. It's not 60-40 or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I probably would lean Iowa State just slightly, just because of that 3-3-5 track record, at least in this matchup against Iowa. And so it'll be interesting to see if Cade McNamara can throw outside. One of the things that didn't occur in the week one game against Utah State was Deontay Vines didn't get any catches. Caleb Brown didn't get any catches. So, does Iowa have the ability to hit some deep shots? They really haven't in this game. In recent history, you go back to 2018, a big one over the middle to Emir Smith-Marset in that game, and then of course the Brandon Smith long pass to set up the only touchdown of that 13-3 win. So it's been rare that Iowa's gone deep, but I feel like that's going to be an interesting matchup to see if Iowa can do that, because I feel like they're going to have to throw the ball at some point. How about let's move up closer to the line of scrimmage, Scott. Iowa's D-line, we think is going to be a strength all year. However, I feel like there was some concern coming out of the opener that wasn't maybe as good as people expected. Iowa State breaking in a new D-line, but still looks to be one of the strengths of its team. What do you think on the trenches for both teams on the defensive side?
On the defensive side, Iowa's clearly the better team there. I mean, Iowa State played well, but they replaced the entire front line. There's no MJ Anderson. There's certainly no Will McDonald. I thought they performed well against UNI, but that's UNI. And I was disappointed in UNI, frankly. I didn't think UNI played nearly as well as I expected them to. And Theo Day didn't play as well as I expected him to. Iowa, people will look and maybe be a little bit disappointed in the number of sacks or whatever. You're talking about a team in Utah State with a really good coach that decided we're not going to try to go against this defensive line. We're not going to win that way. The only way we win is do it with our speed. And they threw a lot of bubble screens. They threw a lot of out routes to try to force the ball in the perimeter. You're not going to get to the quarterback very often that way. And I thought Iowa's pressure was decent to good. Got one sack. But in this matchup, and if you filter it on as to who they're competing against, me and you and the people who cover Iowa have really picked apart a lot of Iowa's offensive woes on the offensive line. But when you look at Iowa State, there are more woes on the offensive line. And going against a better and more experienced unit for Iowa up front, that to me means Iowa has a clear advantage on its defensive line versus Iowa State's offensive line, rather than the other way around, where yes, Iowa showed a lot of deficiencies and weaknesses the other day, but Iowa State's still a pretty new unit up front.
I'm interested to see, Scott, the play of Nick Jackson on Saturday, because I don't feel like we really got to see the real Nick Jackson. I mean, he was basically in pass coverage. Mm-hmm. Iowa had 5-man boxes against Utah State, and to Iowa's credit, left Higgins inside to kind of make all the grunt work tackles, and Jackson was in coverage and did get beat for a 39-yarder in that game. Pretty much the lone real explosive play against the first team defense, but I felt like Nick kind of unfairly got some criticism from the fans in that first game. And I feel like, I don't know, I kind of feel like this could be a moment for him. We'll see. And I know he was successful at Virginia with some blitzing. He's very capable of blitzing. He's good at weaving through. He's not big, but he can weave through traffic to get to the guy he wants to get to. So I could see, Scott, this is kind of my theory for this game. I could see Phil Parker sending some linebacker blitzes in this game, some Sebastian Castro blitzes. I really loved how he played in the opener to put some pressure on Rocco Becht and potentially J.J. Cole, just to kind of force some issues. I only counted a couple blitzes, honestly, against Utah State. Just enough time. It was hot. I feel like Phil's going to be aggressive in this one, and I kind of hope he is, to be honest.
Yeah, this is a game where you can do that. I think when you look at, you have a guy like, as you said, with Nick Jackson, who was he played multiple positions, even though he was more of a middle backer, but he did play on the side and he did a lot of things. And this is a more traditional type of, team you're playing that likes to run downhill once in a while, or a lot of the time actually, and then that has a more traditional passing game. That you can blitz, you can play, your 4-2-5 to effectiveness, and then I think they have enough players in the secondary to where they can play man defense quite a bit. Now that you could get exposed with Jalen Noel against Deshaun Lee if he doesn't play well, but overall, this is a situation where you can play more what you want to play, because last week, as you said, they were playing more of a dime type of scenario, but they were still using Nick Jackson in more of a safety type coverage. I mean, he's the will backer, so he's in coverage a lot. That doesn't allow him to have a lot of tackles or making a lot of plays, and then it allows him the opportunity to get burned. So I think in this case, you can use him to blitz, force the action. Rocco Becht was pretty clean last week. He was efficient at 10 of 13 for Iowa State. And I think, J.J. Cole didn't have a lot of yards. He had more completions than yards, which is kind of funny, 4 or 5. But and they tried to hit the tight ends and not so much the receivers, kind of like Iowa, but they didn't really have a lot of explosive plays there. And Iowa State ran the fewest plays in the country last week. And now they're playing against, I think we can agree, Chad, that Iowa has a better defense than UNI. So
I'll agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. That's a good starting point. So I think Iowa can do a lot of different things here.
Yeah. Very, very curious to see. And Iowa has had really, I mean, even last year in that 10-7 game, the Iowa defense was great, except for one drive. And, really, I mean, Iowa should have a 7-game CyHawk winning streak, to be honest. I mean, they were the better team last year, and just, had a guy slip at the 3 and fumbled at the 1, and just wasn't their game last year. Before we get to offense, because obviously that's going to be a big topic, special teams. I mean, Iowa State looks like that's always been a hindrance, I feel like, for the Cyclones. I mean, you can just envision that punt off, who was it? Michael Sleep Dalton punted it, right? And then after Iowa, couldn't milk the clock, and Terry Roberts recovered, right? Was it Terry Roberts?
Yeah, it was Terry. Yeah, it was Devontae Young, I think.
That's right.
Yeah, one of them had
maybe Young recovered it and Roberts made the play, but anyway.
Yeah, Roberts hit the blocker who hit the punt returner.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. So, but the Iowa State's come a long way. They now have a special teams coordinator. They have a kicker, Chase Contreras, who made a 56-yarder the other day on the field goal, and Jalen Noel had a long punt return, and then their punter, averaging more than Torrey Taylor so far, 53.6 yards per punt. So special teams, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I feel like Iowa State's narrowed that gap a little bit, but I would still give the edge to Iowa.
Iowa has the proven track record in this area. I thought Tyler Perkins was tremendous the other day for the Cyclones, had a 70-yarder, 53 yards per punt. I thought, Torrey had a good game other than the block punt, which really wasn't his fault. That was the upbacks. I don't know what they were doing getting split.
That was so weird. Yeah.
It was like, do you know how to play football? I mean, at that
just
regard,
stood there.
Just stood there and let him go. And against a guy who already had 3. And I let our draft analyst know about him already. I'm like, I told Dane Brugler, I'm like, you might want to watch this guy. I'm not saying he's going to be a first-round talent or anything, but Ike Larson's
he was good.
A guy people are going to look for. But But, and then you look at, Contreras had a, 56-yard field goal, just, one of the better efforts you've seen. But Iowa will present a little bit more resistance, I think, in that area. And Drew Stevens has a track record. He was last year, he was 16 of 18, only 2 misses. And that was in 40-plus range. So, I'll be interested to see how Iowa State can kind of they've had good returners, but they haven't really had great special teams. So if they can make that a net neutral, meaning that Torrey Taylor, who had one of the best punting performances I've ever seen 2 years ago, if they can negate his, punting prowess, and if they're equal in the kicking realm and in the coverage realm, that's going to give them a lot of confidence, because if there's a turnover or if there's field position issues, again, if Torrey Taylor's pinning them down inside the 10, unless there's a breakdown, they're not going to be able to drive 90 yards on this team. They did last year once, and you got to remember they had several players who aren't there for various reasons. Xavier Hutchinson's in the NFL, and then the quarterback, of course, is pleaded guilty yesterday to gambling.
Well, let's flip to offense now, Scott. Iowa State's going to try to run the ball. I think they're not going to put this game on their quarterback's shoulder, I don't think.
No.
The question is, how does Iowa approach the run? Do they, Iowa likes to try to stop the run with 7. They like to keep their secondary free. Can they do that without Noah Shannon? It's a notable loss, to not to have Noah Shannon in that run defense. Iowa's going to try to stop that run. How will they be successful against Cartavius Norton? Abu Sama had a great first game. Looks like the part for the Cyclones. So I guess from an offensive perspective, I expect Iowa State to stick to the run as much as it can, just so that it doesn't have to. I just don't think you want to take shots at Iowa's secondary with Wampa and DeJean back there. And frankly, I thought Deshaun Lee played well. So if you're Iowa State, what is your game?
You have to stick to the run. It's not going to work, but you have to stick to it, because you have to make them respect it. I don't see Iowa at all going from changing its style up front. I think they're going to go 4-2-5. Last week they didn't play a single snap of 4-3, and in this game they might play a few if they get in a 3rd and short, or a goal line situation. They might go into that a little bit, but they didn't have to, and they don't really need to in this one either. You got a center that made his first start last week, got a left tackle making his first start. Neither one of them played, I would say, great for Iowa State. They played okay against a defense that was overmatched. They're going to play against some really, really, really good players, in Iowa's situation. So I think Iowa can control the line of scrimmage, but Iowa State, even if they only get 62 yards rushing against Iowa, because of the way they play, they're going to have to stay with it. They're just going to have to continue to force Iowa to respect it, so then they can play action fake, get the ball to Easton Dean or one of their tight ends. Maybe once in a while get the ball to Jalen Knoll, because if they just try to drop back, Iowa's pass rush is going to get to them. They're going to force young players to make bad mistakes, and it could go really sideways very, very quickly for Iowa State. So they're going to try to run. It's not going to be pretty, but they're going to have to do it just to kind of the way Iowa does it, complementary football, keep its defense off the field for a while.
Yeah, they've got the potential for some explosive plays in their run game, so it is going to be incumbent on those D tackles to absorb more than one guy if they can, so they can free up Higgins, Jackson, and Castro to make some tackles. Obviously, got to hold the edge. We haven't seen, they lost John Wagner, they lost Lucas Van Ness. Noah Shannon's not back. So, I believe in Iowa's defensive line, but, new guys out there, Deontay Craig, Joe Evans is more of a pass rusher, and, Max Llewellyn, Ethan Herkett, still pretty new in terms of experience. So those are important spots. Now the big question, Scott, is how does Iowa move the football? I think you've got to find a way to run the ball. I know the run did not look good last week. Do you put they've gone fullback a lot to try to run at this 3-3-5. Iowa has averaged what I think they've had 342 yards in the last 2 seasons against Iowa State total, which is horrible. I mean, under 200 both games, 150 last year. How do you solve this defense, especially with, the embattled offense? I don't know. Like, where does Iowa find success? I guess I'll put it to you that way.
I don't know. They haven't had much success, as we know, in the last couple of years. But I will say that this year's offense seems to have more potential than it's had last 2 years. Not 3 years, but 2 years. Last year for sure. Remember, last year they had no wide receivers except for Arlen Bruce, who stumbled at the 3-yard line when he was wide open for a touchdown. That would have made it 14-3, and I think put the game out of reach. This year they have 5, I think, that are capable. And I think Caden Weegan played really well the other day. They also have, Sam Laporta was out of position a lot of times trying to play X, and it really negated a lot of his strengths, even though he was the best person for that job. Now you have a ton of tight ends, and they've played 14 personnel, which is amazing. So I don't see them going fullback as much as offset tight end. Like
Could you go do you think 13 is a possibility? 13 personnel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. They've been talking up Estrenga so much.
Yeah, or Stilianos if you want to, as being more of a blocking type of tight end. And or have Eric All come out of the backfield as kind of an offset fullback. But the NFL does that a lot. Only half to a third of the teams actually have real fullbacks. Then a lot of times if they need that, they have a tight end play that position. So Iowa has to establish the run, Chad. They have to in this game, and they have to in every game. And last week they ran a lot of counter. They ran a lot of gap. They did some things, pulling guys, doing things differently, which I'm all in favor of, except they were missing their blocks almost every damn time they did it. So I think in this case, do you go back to the old tried and true inside-outside zone? No. And reason why is because your reliance upon in a 3-3 frame, you rely heavily on cut blocks, and they're going to get called for it. So I think you still try to do that if they can, and if Caleb Johnson has any space, he's going to be effective. But I think this is one where you might have a similar output that you did last week.
It's going to be a grind, man. It could be a quick game if both teams try to run the ball a lot, especially with the new clock rules. Not that there's going to be a lot of first downs anyway, but I don't expect either team to be gunning it a ton. Just very interested to see how Brian Ferentz approaches this game. I mean, such a high-profile spot here. And Iowa's got Caleb Johnson, so you got to get him going. Mm-hmm. And I felt like losing Leishon Williams in the second half with the Heat-related stuff last week probably hurt Iowa just a little bit, just that veteran presence in the backfield, a guy you can count on to maybe get you some tough yards. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm fascinated to see it, Scott. I like the idea of 3 tight end sets and go with that. And, one receiver maybe and try to strike some big plays. I do think it's worth taking shots, though, because I think you've got Caleb Brown just kind of missed it, kind of a lousy stop and go route. I think he was just too late trying it. But he's got wheels. Like you said, Weechan's got wheels. Deontay Vines, just seems like he's ready to break out. And then you got, Mr. Reliable, Regaini. And obviously Seth Anderson was probably the highlight of that group last week. So anyway, can't wait. I picked Iowa 2013. Did you make a pick yet?
I'm going to go Iowa 17-6.
Ooh, defense.
Yeah, big time defensive game. I just, with Iowa State, I just don't know how many drives they can do against this Iowa defense. If Iowa has a fumble or a turnover or a block punt, yeah, they can score from there. But if they're going to have to go 70 plus yards, I can only see them doing it once or twice at total. This defense is good, and their offense is not as good as it was last year. So it may get there in time, but at this point in the season, I have much more faith that Iowa can get 2 to 3 scoring drives versus Iowa State getting 1 to 2.
All right, man. We'll see how it plays out Saturday. We got a couple more brief topics to hit on as we exit episode 4 of Legends and Listeners. From the Channel Seed Studios, Scott, Kirk Ferentz, 199 Division I wins as a head coach, 12 of them at Maine, 187 in Iowa City. I kind of wrote this, well, it hasn't been published yet, but I feel like it would be fitting to get number 200 against the team that he started his career at Iowa 0-4 against. What sticks out to you as Kirk Ferentz goes for number 200 on Saturday?
Yeah, I wrote a piece today about that. And, he's got a different personality and vibe than most of the coaches that are in that. There's some who are kind of generals, and Kirk's humility, and I think in his approach to adversity it really stands out to me as far as how he's gotten to this point, because he's willing to accept responsibility, which some coaches are not. And he's willing to listen and make changes when appropriate, not necessarily with us, and not with his offense as much, but he is very stubborn there. But I think the ability to react to situations and handle adversity, I think if there is no better coach that I've seen handle adversity and adverse situations and respond favorably than Kirk Ferentz. And we can go back every single year. There's those moments, those crossroad moments. And last year is as vivid as anything after Columbus, and yet to come out and win 5 of the last 6 with a team that had the worst offense I've ever seen, speaks to him, his captains, but it's his leadership. So overall, to get win number 200 at Iowa State, a big rival that, there was a lot of pressure on him to finally win that game in 2003, would speak volumes.
Maybe we'll see emotional Kirk if he gets that 17-6 win as he forecasted on Saturday. Yeah, good stuff there. Yeah, I feel like it's pretty impressive that they've won 5 straight times in Ames. I mean, that is tough to do. Mm-hmm. Big 12 teams have not had much success in Jack Trice, so Kirk has found a way. And I do expect him to find a way this week, but I think it's going to be tense. It's going to be tough. Big Ten this week, Scott. Some interesting games on the card. No more interesting to me than Nebraska, Colorado. How about that? We got to get in the press box early to beat the motorcades, to beat the chaos. 11 o'clock, big noon game on Fox. Bill, I wrote this in my preview. Bill Connolly's SP Plus has Nebraska winning by 8. Yet all the public money, all the money's going towards Colorado after what they did at TCU. So that's the fascinating matchup to me. I know I missed it completely. I whiffed on Northwestern last week against Rutgers, but I kind of think Nebraska wins this game. I know I'm probably crazy, but I'm going to go with the Huskers. In a one-score game. How about that?
One-score game at Colorado, huh? What's awesome about this is a couple of years ago when this game was all scheduled, it was like, hey, 2 old rivals hooking up early in the year and playing and having fun. Well, now you've got one of the most interesting games of not only the weekend, but of the early month, because of what Dion was able to do in week 1 against TCU and Travis Hunter and all that. But I look at Nebraska and I don't think they're that bad. I think they actually are decent defensively. Offensively, they played exactly the way they have, in the last 10 years, which is they found a way to lose. But I do think they pull this one out. I agree. I picked them to win myself. So, 3.5, and, it was an 8 a week ago, before Colorado won, it was going to be Nebraska -8. Now it's Colorado -3.5. All eyes are on Dion and what he's able to do. But this would either ratchet up that interest to infinity and beyond, or it would pop the balloon for a little while. And I think Nebraska wins. And, because what it does, though, Chad, if Nebraska loses and they start 0-2 and they lose to Colorado and Minnesota, it ends the honeymoon very, very quickly for Matt Rule. Yeah. Because people are going to look over and say, Dion did all this. Why can't you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Matt Rule's a great hire, but yeah, it's a tough situation. I think he thought it was an automatic win here before. Now it's going to be interesting. And you think Kirk Ferentz would ever, point out in a press conference, do you believe no. Like Dion did with Edward,
no. Yeah.
Edward the other day? So just a different dynamic. And
Yeah.
I'm here for the entertainment. And then, of course, our game, Iowa State, might be the best Big Ten game on the schedule this week. But I'm super interested after we're done to see how Wisconsin does at Wazoo. I feel like it was kind of an underwhelming. I feel like Wisconsin and I were in the same boat. Kind of like wanted to see more in the openers, but kind of got the job done, and now get kind of that road game litmus test against a team that maybe looked better than people expected in week one. What do you think about Wisconsin?
Well, they lost to Wazoo last year at home, and I think that was probably what started the slope for Paul Christ getting forced out. Whose son, by the way, is an analyst at Iowa, Kellen Christ. But I think I saw enough in the second half of Wisconsin to think that, all right, I think this team is probably starting to build in the right direction. It was an early game. It was against Buffalo. I'm not going to put too much into it, but going on the road to Wazoo in their last year of being a Power 5 team, I do think that Wisconsin pulls out a win, but it's got some challenges. It's a weird place. It's a tough location to get to, and then they've had success against Wisconsin, but I think the Badgers are a little bit better, and I'll be interested to see how they handle Braylon Allen, because I think he's a type of running back you want to give him the ball. And how does that mesh with their offense?
Yeah, I've got Wisconsin covering the 6. Last thing, Scott, what are you working on for the Athletic? Anything you want to shoot out there?
Today I decided to go all in on the Kirk, 199/200. And so I wrote about, whether or not he's a Hall of Famer, because he still does not reach that threshold of 60% winning percentage. However, when you look, there are 27 other coaches in the Hall of Fame who have not hit that, including Hayden Fry. Is it an arbitrary line? And so I have a lot of people talking about Kirk and his career, and it's not hard to do. People love to talk about Kirk. But then I also threw in, as kind of a sidebar, the All Ferentz team and the top 10 wins of his career.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's a
Check
lot
that
of
out.
there's a lot of discussion there. I'm sure people are kind of like, what? But it was a lot of fun to put together, and to have it on CyHawk Week is an added bonus. So, Chad, what do you got coming up?
Yeah. I should have mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the run game, but the 14 of the I wrote an article that posted today that at Hawk Central, the 14 of the last 15 CyHawk meetings, the winner has had the most rushing attempts. So that is a good reminder for Brian Ferentz to stick to the run, and I think Iowa State will too. So super. I just love talking about the matchup itself. So I'm glad we could do this today, Scott.
Absolutely.
On this platform, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely, Chad. It's always a good time, and I think we can both, talking a little bit about the CyHawk for a second. It's always a good week, a fun week. I think everybody gets energized by it, but I always say, because of the intensity of it, happiness is Jack Trice / Kinnick Stadium in my rearview mirror when it's over with.
Oh, man. Agree 100%. All right. Thanks, Scott. And thank you, listeners, for making legends and listeners an early hit on the Iowa Everywhere Network. Join us next Thursday at 11 a.m. from these Channel Seed studios. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow reminding you to stay Iowa nice and enjoy the game on Saturday. Talk to you next week here on Iowa Everywhere.